Why are you wearing a hat? It's not even that cold out. Because I'm manifesting. I'm manifesting. I'm willing autumn into existence. Let me be whimsy. Oh, so this is like a fucked up book. Oh, okay. Don't mind if I do. Look, I brought you a bit of a different type of offering today. This is not a traditional horror book we're going to be talking about. This is a different type of disturbing. I'm referring to Tampa by Alissa Nutting. A few months back, I kept seeing this book everywhere, and I kept hearing that it was controversial and that there were actually people who wanted this book to be taken down or banned or something. Of course, like is always the case, if you hear that somebody wants to ban a book, your interest is going to be piqued. And so I looked into it. I saw it referred to somewhere as a gender-flipped Lolita. So basically an older woman with a younger boy. I didn't see direct comparisons to Lolita in terms of anything regarding writing style or anything like that. It seemed to be mostly about the plot. I was like, okay, well, Lolita is certainly a controversial book. Not that I'm well educated in literary history or anything like that, but at face value, it seems like Lolita has to be one of the most misunderstood novels in somewhat recent times. And I think Lolita is a very good example of you can read the same exact story but have a completely different experience depending on whether or not you are willing to entertain nuance when reading it. People who are dismissive of it based off of the premise alone. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov is a very good example of that. And I was curious to see if that was the same with this story. If there is something actually outrageous here, or if there is just a lack of nuance. So our main character is a woman named Celeste. Just kidding. Where did that come from? Couldn't tell you. Is a woman named Celeste, and she's 26 years old. She's married to a man named Ford, and at face value, they have a great, happy life together. They're both physically attractive people. They're relatively young. They are well off. He's a police officer, but he comes from a wealthy family, so he has inherited wealth. Celeste, with her interest in young boys, of course, she has decided that she should be a teacher. So she's going to be a middle school teacher teaching 8th grade, and she has specifically pursued this in order to have access to that age of child. There certainly is overlap plot-wise with Lolita. Little things like she mentions at the beginning of the book that she had one of her first sexual experiences when she was about that age. And she believes that it essentially imprinted on her and that she never stopped being attracted to boys that age, even though she's 26 now. Which, if you're familiar with Lolita, it's similar in the sense that Humbert has an experience as a teenage boy with a teenage girl, and it has a dramatic effect on him, an imprint, if you will. And he uses that in a similar way of just he becomes sort of mentally and emotionally stuck at that age and wanting to relive that age through his partners or whatever. Similar setup with having that young experience that you're just completely fixated on and you're trying to sort of recreate the magic of that moment in a way. It's also similar in the sense that Celeste is using her husband Ford as basically a front, but Ford doesn't know that. So she is just using him for the appearance of normalcy, for access to his money, but she views interacting with him, whether it's sexually or just romantically, in any way, she very much views Ford as a necessary burden. Similar, again, to Lolita with Humbert and Lolita's real name is Dolores. I don't know how much is common knowledge. Dolores Hayes is Lolita's real name. Dolores' mother develops a crush on Humbert, but he does not return those feelings because she is his age. But obviously he doesn't want to upset her because he wants to maintain access to her daughter, Dolores, or Lolita. She's not using Ford to gain access to children. She is simply using him as a front in order to appear normal to the rest of the world and his money and whatnot. But he doesn't know. He, of course, realizes that the relationship is not perfect, and he sees the sorts of cracks in it. But like a lot of marriages have their problems. He is not aware of her proclivities, and he does not see any of the issues in the relationship as being indicative of her interest, or he has no idea that there's anything like this going on. So of course Celeste starts teaching school, and she's got her eyes out on the classroom, and she is wanting to select a target. And so she is looking for a specific type of boy. She wants a boy who looks a certain way, who looks his age. She doesn't want a boy who looks like he works out or anything like that. She wants a boy who looks 14. A boy who is not too confident, because it's imperative that she can feel confident that once she initiates this relationship that he's not going to talk, right? So she doesn't want a kid with a lot of confidence who's going to feel inclined to brag about banging the teacher. She even mentions that she thinks it would be even better if the kid was a little bit ugly. At this point, we are getting a little bit into a huge difference between this and Lolita conceptually. Whether or not this is just the author's approaches, or if this is due to the gender swap, up for debate. Now, in this, she specifically says that it would be even better if she could find a boy who's a little bit ugly because she wants to be his fantasy. She wants to be the sexy teacher that the boys have a crush on, and that this boy that she picks is going to fantasize about her, and that she's going to be this amazing first experience that he'll always remember, and no other woman, no other experience that he ever has will ever compare to the sexual imprint that she leaves on him. So much of her goal in this is not just about her lust, but about being the one who gets to incite that in another. Versus in Lolita, where Humbert is very much obsessed with her, and while he does crave love from her, he is hyper aware that she is the object of fantasy and he is the fantasizer. Another thing that she likes about this is that because she is targeting a young, inexperienced boy, she can have confidence that he is going to allow her to lead the encounter, and she's going to be able to show him the ropes, aka tailored to her preferences. Having that sort of control over the situation is part of the allure for her. I would like to be very clear that when we are making comparisons, it is not about the execution of the writing style, because Lolita is written very beautifully. That's part of the juxtaposition that you experience reading that book. There are very disturbing things being written, but they are written in a very romanticized, beautiful, flowy way. This is written in a very kind of mean-spirited humor and vulgar. So this is a very different energy-wise to Lolita. So to really drive the point home about the difference in the writing style between these books, so I'm going to put up a quote from Lolita, and then a quote from this book. So you can compare and contrast. So I just want to put that to rest, that this is a completely different experience. And there's no indication that she was trying to make it anything like that. The way that Alissa Nutting describes things is unhinged and funny in a very mean-spirited way. The character Celeste is just constantly tearing other women down for one reason or another. And at one point she describes, I believe she's describing another teacher, and she says, she gave the long grunt of a walrus sorry. She gave the long grunt of a walrus bearing a load of breech pups. That's so specific. That's such a specific way of describing a sound that a human woman made. This character does not have a conscience. She is excited about this opportunity working at this school. She is foaming at the mouth. Like she cannot wait. She has no reservations. There is no concern about the possible effect that her behavior is going to have on these kids. Her only concern is in getting caught, basically, and trying to maintain control over the relationship. Because she's not looking for a one-off. She's looking to maintain a sexual relationship as long as she wants to. You know, until they get too old for her, basically. So she's working at the school. She finds her target, and she's like, that's the kid I need. His name is Jack. And she initiates with him. And him being a 14-year-old boy and being the correct target for her attentions, they do start to engage in a sexual relationship together. This is not a one-off. This is an ongoing thing. And the thing about this, her complete and utter lack of emotion, her desire for, like, very intentionally wanting to negatively affect his life. She wants him to compare every future woman he dates to her and for none of them to match up. Basically saying that she wants him to never be able to have a fulfilling relationship. Not even indifference, just actual malice and vindictiveness. She doesn't care about this boy in the slightest. She only cares about him in terms of she wants these encounters with him and she wants to keep him happy enough that she can continue to have these encounters. When you're young and an older person is paying attention to you in that way, it's very easy for you to think that your age is a deterrent. So you think that that person must really like you. They like you despite how young you are or whatever. As opposed to the reality that your age is quite literally the only thing they like about you. And so this poor boy, he thinks that when he's 18 that they're going to finally be able to go public and all of this stuff, and he doesn't realize that she's not going to be sticking around that long. Not having that life experience to see the red flags, so completely enamored by this beautiful woman paying him attention. Without giving too much away, I guess I'll just say that as the relationship continues, things become increasingly complicated. Things do start to unravel. The entire story is from Celeste's perspective, so there is this lack of emotion about the things that are happening, but you get this emotional fulfillment from the story because of the way that Celeste is witnessing the actions and emotions of the other characters. So even though we don't get to see things from Jack's perspective, because we have the dialogue of what he's saying to her and we see his emotional responses to things, and you see that juxtaposition between her and everybody else. As far as I can tell, the thing that is making this book something that people would like to ban, it's strange to me again that you would be upset about the premise if you read the premise before picking up the book. Like, I could understand not wanting to read a book like this. I just don't understand why you did. Why did you then? The negative reaction to this is largely going to be based off of the plot alone. And to that, we're falling into that lack of nuance again. But also I think something that is difficult and awkward to read is that it does get spicy. So it is descriptive in that way, the same way that you would see in an adult smut book. So I can understand why that makes people uncomfortable. I think though, and this is where we're getting into a little bit of nuance, I would like to compare this to something that is, I'm not saying that this has smut in it, but just hear me out. Compare this to something like The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. If you aren't familiar with that story, young girl, Susie Salmon, her neighbor, Mr. Harvey, is an older man, and he ends up tricking her into being alone with him, where he essays her and kills her. All of that happens at the beginning of the book. The majority of that book is about her journey in the afterlife and navigating into heaven and all this stuff. Now, comparing the essay scene in The Lovely Bones, which I'm not saying that's not smutty or overly descriptive or anything, but I think part of the reason why we can read a scene like that, which is disturbing in its own ways, but it does not incite people to want to ban the book or anything like that. It's not just a matter of vulgarity. I think it's because of the fact that we're from the perspective of the victim. And so people do not misunderstand that this behavior is being celebrated, right? You read The Lovely Bones, where this young girl is being attacked, and you are in the victim's perspective. There's pain and suffering, and this is a bad thing that's happening. After he essays her, he makes her tell him that she loves him before he kills her. Like, it's pretty dark. It's a pretty dark scene, and again, it's not overly vulgar, but I think that part of our ability to feel sad instead of angry is because of the fact that we're in the victim's perspective. Compared to something like this, where we are experiencing these sexual encounters from the perspective of the villain. So she's happy as a lark. She's celebrating. She loves what's happening because she's the one trying to make it happen, right? So of course, in her perspective, it's going to come across like a good thing because she does think it's a good thing. I would implore you to consider how different that scene in The Lovely Bones would be if we were coming from Mr. Harvey's perspective. Right? I think sometimes people struggle to understand the difference between the main character's perspective and the author's perspective. Sometimes you see people throwing around that a book is racist or sexist or something, and they'll show examples and it's literally just the character. Just because the author wrote the character doesn't mean that those are the author's views. We have to be able to understand when reading books that it is supposed to be reflective of actual perspectives in the world. There are racist people in the world. It shouldn't be a difficult concept, but I think people just get so hung up on this is a bad thing. They just won't allow themselves to actually consider it as a work of art to be interpreted. They just see the bad thing and they want it to go away. I mean, this book in general, I thought it was different than what I was expecting. While the humor in it, our main character Celeste, her humor is extremely mean-spirited in nature, as discussed previously, but it is genuinely funny at times. As far as the execution of the writing of this book, the things that I liked, the humor genuinely made me laugh at times. I really think that most of this book, it's meant to be kind of tongue-in-cheek. This character is so delusional. I think sometimes when you're from the perspective of a character, people make the mistake of taking everything at face value. So if a character thinks a thought in their head, sometimes the reader will just assume that that thought is true. I think that that's something that we really need to try to stop assuming There's the unreliable narrator, right? Like if you are in somebody's head, think about all the thoughts you have in a day out in the world. And how many of those thoughts are you guessing what somebody else is thinking or what somebody else's motives are? And you don't know if you're right or not. You're just sort of spitballing, and sometimes you think you're right. We make assumptions all the time, but sometimes you're way off base. And if you were delusional, you probably wouldn't know, right? We do have evidence to support the fact that she is an attractive woman. For her, it's like she's so attractive that male attention from adult men just really doesn't do much for her anymore because it's always come very easily to her. But because of those experiences, she legitimately thinks everyone is obsessed with her and foaming at the mouth over her. Like the way she describes random characters and random encounters and the thoughts that she thinks that they're having in their head about her is if we were meant to take that at face value, it would seem silly. It's like this woman is just like, she's full of herself. She's not right in the head. And so because she's had experiences validating that she's attractive, she's taken that to the extreme, or she assumes that all women are jealous of her. She just has this view of the world that everybody thinks about her as much as she thinks about herself. And if you took that at face value when you were reading it, it would seem like really poor writing. I don't take that at face value. We as readers have to always keep in mind is that when you are reading from the perspective of the villain, it's not necessarily that certain events are meant to be portrayed as good things. They're meant to be portrayed as things that the villain wants to happen. And I actually do think that there is some commentary in this regarding, I guess you could say pretty privilege, but I think more so about the infantilization of adult women. And so this is kind of where we're getting into the importance of the fact that the adult in this situation is the woman and the child is a boy. So often people are dismissive of how much damage this sort of thing does to a young boy. And grown men will say, if that happened to me, I would have kept my mouth shut. I wish that had happened to me as a child, and all of these things. And I wish that people would stop assuming that it's not traumatizing if it's a little boy. When you infantilize adult women, that is part of the issue because you think that that adult woman is on the same level as that 8th grade boy. Right? So in your mind, well, women are just basically children. So it's not a big deal. They're practically the same age emotionally, mentally, whatever. When I see comments like that, oh, I would have loved for that to happen when I was a kid. It's like, my guy, that's normal. It's normal when you're a kid to have a crush on an adult. That's normal. So yeah, like a lot of people when they're kids wish something like that would have happened with an adult that they had a crush on. I wish that teacher had given me the time of day. I wish that adult man I had a crush on would have thought I was pretty or whatever. Like, that's normal. That doesn't mean that if that had actually happened to you, that it would have been a good experience. There is a huge difference between our perception of how our fantasies would play out versus how they actually play out. A lot of people wish a lot of things happen to them until they do. You know, people regret winning the lottery. They say that winning the lottery is the worst thing that ever happened to them. It ruined their life. It's so sad that little boys are just treated like they're children. Like, it's bad enough that adult men are treated as though they can't trust anybody enough to be vulnerable around them. But you're spreading this bullshit to little kids? Now, actual children, aren't vulnerable if they're boys. It's just terribly sad, and I do think that there is commentary in this book about that specifically. Despite how horrible the things that she does are, nobody really views her as threatening because she's just a pretty 26-year-old girl. And it's like, nah, she's a soulless pervert and a grown woman. I talked about before about how we are in the villain's perspective. But the reality of the situation is that these children are groomed, right? If we had read it from his perspective, it probably would have been largely positive, at least in the beginning, because he thinks that this thing that's happening is good too. At first, he thinks what's happening is good in the moment until he gets what he thinks he wants. And then, what do you know? There are long-term consequences. Who would have thunk? Just because you want something doesn't mean it's good for you. And just because something feels good in the moment doesn't mean that it's good for you. And so I do think that there is commentary in this book about that subject, about how people do not view Celeste as a threat. I guess to me it's like, this book, there's nothing in this book that it needs to be banned over, but the things that are disturbing about this book are not even the reasons why people want to ban it. They just want to ban it because it's about an adult being attracted to a kid. As if writing about that existing is the same as promoting it, and it's not. Where is this threshold where we can celebrate, uplift even, serial killers? We can read about a serial killer and an FBI agent all day, every day, and you can root for the villain. You can read from a serial killer's perspective, and you can understand that we're not promoting murder. So why is it so different with certain crimes where we suddenly can't understand that anymore? In conclusion, this is something that at face value is going to come across as just sort of shock value. But I think that that is a little bit unfair. I do think that there is more substance to it than just shock value. But to be frank, I just don't think it's going to be remembered that way. I think part of the reason why something like Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov stood the test of time is because of how beautifully written it is. But I appreciate the author's effort. Despite the crudeness and the vulgarity in this book, I really do think that there is an intelligence to her approach. I would be very curious to read this author again. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye. Alissa Nutting. I just read that out loud for the first time. Is that a real name? Is that a pen name?